One time when I was about the age that many of you in the youth group are, I decided I was going to play a pretty big prank at school. It was early on in my pranking days, so maybe it was because I wasn't yet that great at pranks. Or maybe it was because I'd actually pulled off a few successful pranks, one of them even getting school canceled for the day, and so perhaps I was getting sloppy. Either way, I got caught. Now, I'm not going to tell you what I tried to do, lest some of you out there think it sounds like a fun idea. But let me tell you, it should have gotten me expelled. I remember vividly sitting in the principal's office with that cold, sick feeling in your stomach, knowing that you're doomed. And the principal just staring at me from across his desk for what seemed like an eternity, not saying anything. In fact, I was the one who spoke first, asking him what he was going to do to me, and he still did not answer for what seemed like forever. Taylor, I'm not going to call your parents or expel you. I looked up in amazement. I couldn't even ask why. I was so dumbfounded. You should be expelled for what you just tried to do. But I'm going to look the other way. Remember this and go back to class. And that was it. I was able to finish out the school year like normal simply because of the undeserved grace of a gracious principal. So for the past 2 days, we've been looking at the grace of God that is greater than all our sin. Grace that brought Israel's life full circle, taking him from being someone trying to steal blessings to someone who was handing blessings out. It's grace that took the history of Judah and turned it around and made it into the history of Jesus Christ himself. So today we're going to go back a little bit into Genesis 48 again and look a little bit more at the blessing of Israel on the two sons of Joseph and how they too got undeserved grace. Now remember, in the first part of Genesis 48, this is an adoption ceremony. Israel taking the two sons of Joseph and making them a part of his family. And that's actually a really big deal. You see, it's not just that they get to take the family name of Israel, but he's guaranteeing that each of them will be the leader of a half tribe in Israel. Each of them will have a permanent place in the history of God's people, and each of them will get an equal portion of the inheritance and promises that God had made to Abraham, to Isaac, and to him. So instead of being obscure men in Egypt, they will have a permanent place in the people of God and in the promised land. That's a really big deal. Israel is passing on the covenant that God made with him to these two boys, and they did nothing to deserve that. Sure, they were probably your average Egyptian boys, but that just means that they deserved to live out, at best, an obscure life in Egypt, an insignificant life. Instead, out of pure grace, Israel makes them a part of his family and gives them an equal portion in the inheritance of the promised land. And just as if they were biological sons, just as if they were like Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and all the rest of them. Now, does that sound at all to you like the gospel? It should. Ephesians 1 tells us that God adopted us into his family, not because we deserved it, because, quote, according to the riches of his grace, which he lavished upon us. And the result of that isn't just that we get to call ourselves Christians in this life, but that we get the full rights as children of God, the full inheritance that God is going to give to his children. Manasseh and Ephraim, their families received equal portions in the promised land. And when Jesus returns, he is going to bring in an entirely new creation. And because God has adopted us into his family, that new creation will be ours. Jesus is the one who deserves it because he earned it, We actually earned the opposite, but we get undeserved grace, like Ephraim, like Manasseh. Yet there's even more grace in this passage that we need to see. Grace that is greater than all our sin, grace that is completely undeserved. You know, when you read it after this lesson, notice how Joseph brings his sons to Israel. He takes Manasseh in his left hand so that he would be on Israel's right. He takes Ephraim in his right hand so that he would be on Israel's left. And the right hand is always the one who got the greater blessing. Because in this time, at this time in the culture, the oldest always got the greater blessing. So Joseph brings Manasseh in his left hand to Israel's right. Yet Israel crosses his hands. And when Joseph sees that, he tries to correct Israel as if he had made an error. But Israel says, I know, my son, I know, but this is how it will be. Ephraim didn't deserve the greater blessing any more than I deserve to be able to go right back to class without any discipline. Yet the Holy Spirit guides him to give him the greater blessing, the undeserved grace. And you know, this crossing of hands is a beautiful picture of what God does for us in Jesus. You see, the right hand of blessing should have gone to Jesus because he earned it. We should have gotten the hand of judgment because that's what we earned. Yet God crosses his hands. He gives the hand of judgment on Jesus so that we can get the hand of blessing. Could we earn it? No. Did we deserve it? Certainly not. Yet God gives us undeserved grace. And the undeserved grace isn't like me just not getting expelled from school. It's like the principal not only not expelling you, but then giving you a land, a home, and all the things you will ever need for free forever. That's the undeserved grace we receive in Jesus. You think about that, and I'll see you tomorrow.